Hi, everyone. I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes to log in from the waiting room. You should be on mute when you enter, but please just double check that you're on mute. And this is a Zoom meeting, so you have the option to show your camera if you want to. Of course, you don't have to, but our presenter today would kind of like to see your face if you want to be a little more interactive. And I've got the closed captions up and running. So you'll see that at the top of your screen. You'll see a red live box and you can click on that to get the closed captions. All right, well, welcome everyone. Happy Friday. And I did not think about this when I was planning this webinar, but Friday is just the perfect day to have a webinar about mindfulness and wellness and taking care of yourself. So I'm very happy to be here today with Laura Kelley. And I have to thank my coworker at FLS, Nicole Avila, for introducing us. And as soon as I talked to Laura, I thought, oh my goodness, I need her to share her wisdom with us, because not only is she an immigration attorney, she's also a mindfulness wellness coach. So she's just amazing, and I'm so happy to have her here. So Laura Kelley is here with us today to talk about bringing the practice of mindfulness to your practice. And as I mentioned, she's an attorney for an immigration law firm called Duque, Kelley Associates in Doral, Florida. And this has been approved for 1 CLE, so I'll announce that at the end. And as always, it will be recorded and sent out to everyone afterwards in case you need to refer back to it. So without further ado, welcome, Laura. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for being here. I'm super excited to share a little bit of mindfulness to you all. I wanted to say that mindfulness is very trendy right now. I think we hear a lot about it, but there's not a whole lot of explanation of what it is. And I have personally found my own journey of mindfulness to be incredibly beneficial, not only in my personal life, but also in my professional life. And so I embarked on becoming a mindfulness instructor. So I'm got my initial teacher training in November 2019. And now I'm actually starting a 2-year program that is led by Jack Cornfield and Tara Brock. So that actually starts this weekend. So, you know, the mindfulness is trendy, not just for trendy's sake. It's honestly been a breakthrough and beneficial for people in so many different ways. So I'm really happy to be here sharing a little bit of what I know and hopefully inspiring you all to seek out more information. And I know my contact information will be shared, so I'm happy to answer any questions at all. And please feel free to interrupt at any time during the presentation. I would like for this to be conversational, if at all possible. We have quite a bit of time. I'm going to go through my presentation, which is kind of like the nuts and bolts of mindfulness and mindfulness meditation. And then at the end, I'm going to have an opportunity for us to do a brief guided meditation practice. And then again, another period of reflection and questions if you would like to engage in that. Oh, I'm actually changing my, wrong way. Sorry about that. All right, so what is mindfulness? Okay, so there are a lot of definitions of mindfulness, but the one that I prefer to use that was developed by John Kabat-Zinn is non-judgmental present moment awareness. Now, if you're like me, it's like, but what does that mean? It means be here now, be in the present, as opposed to being past looking or for future focused. Now, that doesn't mean don't have goals, don't have dreams, but it's recognizing that whatever we experience, we're experiencing in the present. So even if we're caught up in the past or things that happened in the past, you're actually experiencing that now. You're experiencing your thoughts about the past in the present. And it also means that you have to learn to accept the thoughts and emotions as they arise without resistance or judgment. So that means things are going to come up. Your thoughts about the past are going to come up. Your emotions are going to come up. And if we resist them or try to push them away, that actually just causes them usually to bubble up somewhere else, or it become explosive sometime in the future, or we sometimes buffer, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but just basically engage in some other activity to distract us from the thoughts and emotions as they arise. But instead, if we can learn to be mindful, which is learn to be comfortable with the thoughts that arise and say and accept that they are there, without that resistance, without self-judgment or negative self-talk, we find that they dissipate much more easily and without a great deal of annoyance. So the formal practice of mindfulness is known as mindfulness meditation. The informal practice, however, is what we hope mindfulness meditation will help us experience in daily life. And that is non-judgmental awareness of breath, body, feelings, emotions, thoughts throughout your day. And when you can really engage in that informal practice in your daily life, that is mindfulness in your life. That's the practice of mindfulness. And so the formal practice helps us focus. It helps us learn how to be mindful in our daily life. All right, so what are the detrimental effects of mindlessness or this living on autopilot, right? I think we can all relate to this, of this autopilot sensation. I think most of us have had this experience of driving and getting to our destination without knowing how we got there. And that's the activation of the default mode network, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. But it's also this process of overeating, overworking, overthinking, overwatching, over binging, over scrolling. All of these things are activities that we engage in order to avoid negative thoughts or emotions, or to distract ourselves from negative thoughts and emotions. And it's that mindless, distraction in our life that does not allow us to truly be present or engaged in what we're doing. And the problem with being mindless is that it doesn't actually resolve any of our problems. It doesn't solve any problems. If anything, it prolongs it and typically exacerbates them. So if we, one common thing that I see is procrastination. Who doesn't procrastinate at least a little bit? But when we have this thought, right, I don't have enough time, right? I have all this list of to-dos, and I have the thought, I don't have enough time. And so the feeling that may arise, or which arises in me, is this feeling of overwhelm. And when I feel overwhelmed, what do I typically do? I procrastinate. And how do I procrastinate? By, scrolling on social media, binging on Netflix, chatting with my friends, basically doing everything except my to-do list. And at the end of the day, my results are, I still have that to-do list to do. Maybe I have some self-judgment because I'm like, why did I procrastinate? And I'm actually creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that I don't have enough time, right? It's not that I didn't have enough time in the beginning. It's that I thought that I didn't have enough time. And rather than utilize my time wisely, I have squandered it through other activities, right? So the idea is to gain awareness of our lives, our time, and of our present moment, without buffering, without engaging in activities that have a net negative in our life. So a net negative is, a negative consequence. You can have net negative, net neutral, or net positive. And so many of these over drinking, overeating, over watching, over scrolling have net negative consequences. I will get the hang of using my mouse to do this probably at the end of the presentation. So also, why mindfulness? Our minds typically have a negativity bias. And that means, our human brain is wired for survival. And we have survived for 350,000 years as Homo sapiens because of this negativity bias. In other words, looking out for danger is a survival technique. And being highly receptive to negativity has allowed us to survive. So those of us who have made it this far in our evolution are, and very wired to this negativity bias. And that is excellent if you are a cave person or a primitive human. But now in our modern world, we are basically bombarded with things that make us think that we are in danger. And another thing is that our brains are wired to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and expend as little energy as possible. And that's something called the motivational triad. And it is, again, it's a survival technique, So when we procrastinate, when we buffer, this is literally what our brain is designed to do. And so there's no point in having negative self-talk or negative self-judgment for our brains doing what normal human brains do, right? One of my favorite quotes, and I do believe this is from Jon Kabat-Zinn as well, is pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So as human beings in our human life, it's 50-50. There's no way any human is going to achieve 100% happiness or 100% positive emotion. It is the 50-50, which is what it means to be human. And that human life necessitates experiencing pain. But pain plus resistance or times resistance is what creates suffering, right? To experience pain is not the same as experiencing suffering. And so that when we experience pain or negative emotion and we resist it, white knuckle it, we push it down, or we buffer, that is how we exacerbate our experience and create suffering in our life. On the other hand, when we can experience pain with acceptance and self-love, that's how we can experience growth. So this is what I was talking about before. This is the default mode network. And this is that autopilot process that exists in our brain. And so the default mode network here is a group of brain regions that seem to show lower levels of activity when we are engaged in a particular task, like paying attention, but higher levels of activity when we are awake and not involved in any specific mental exercise. It's during these times that we may be daydreaming, recalling memories, envisioning the future, monitoring the environment, thinking about the intentions of others, and so on. All things that we often do when we find ourselves just thinking, without any explicit goal of thinking in mind. Additionally, recent research has begun to detect links between activity in a default mode network and mental disorders like depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia. Furthermore, therapies like meditation have received attention for influence activity in the default mode network, suggesting this may be part of their mechanism for improving well-being. So I want to see if anybody has any questions at this point.
Everybody's being shy at the moment, but if anyone has questions, you can type them into the chat box. Zoom meeting doesn't have the separate Q&A box, so just feel free to put them in the chat and I'll keep an eye out.
Okay, excellent. Okay, I see. All righty, so thank you. All right, so mindfulness is also, like I said, very on trend these days because we are getting more and more research about the benefits. And it's kind of, my take is you do not have to accept anything that I'm saying. And in fact, I hope you do not. I hope you will listen with an open mind and try it out for yourself and see what rings true for you, what doesn't ring true for you, and ultimately try some of these activities and see whether they benefit you or not. But there's a lot of research being done right now on mindfulness. And indeed, there's, a lot of universities have programs, and the mindfulness-based stress reduction actually started I'm trying that the name escapes me of the university, but it was the first major program as part of a major university, and that is a secular usage of mindfulness practice for things like pain treatment, so fibromyalgia, chronic pain treatment, and grief, things of that nature. So according to most recent research into neuroscience, mindfulness practices dampen activity in our amygdala and increase connections between our amygdala and our prefrontal cortex. Right, so our prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain that is our modern brain, and then we have our primitive brain, and that's kind of what we default to. And when we use our prefrontal cortex is how we can plan and recover. And the mindfulness practice essentially creates these new neural pathways. There was a time, like prior to the 1980s, that we believed, or science believed, that if we lost brain cells, that was it. You couldn't grow them back. You're essentially given a certain number of brain cells in your life, and you kill them off. That's it. And essentially, people couldn't change, and our brains couldn't change. And what we found out is that we actually have something called neuroplasticity, right? The ability of our brains to be flexible and change our patterns, essentially. And this is, for me, finding this out was amazingly good news. I'm not sure if you've heard this idea, but like neurons fire together. And when we repeat an action over and over again, we reinforce that neural pathway, that well-worn path, right? And that's why they become patterns. And so we just do the same things over and over again. It's almost like one of my mindfulness teachers described it as sledding down a mountain. And every time you go sled down that mountain, you're wearing down into 2 tracks. And so over time, it's almost impossible to veer off those 2 tracks, right? You're just stuck in the same path down. And what mindfulness does is it allows us to start, basically adding more snow and smoothing out those tracks so that we can decide to go in a different way. And so for people who are highly reactive, right, trigger reaction, it allows us to get some space between the trigger and the reaction. And that can be very beneficial, not only for anger management, but just for how we enjoy our lives. Being reactive is incredibly uncomfortable. It does not, lead to a joyful existence to be reactive. And the goal is to learn to be responsive rather than reactive. Okay. So in one 2016 study, researchers measured mindfulness in 88 couples. They took their cortisol levels. So cortisol is a hormone, a stress hormone, in each couple before and after they discussed the conflict in the relationship. Unsurprisingly, cortisol levels spiked during the discussion, a sign of high stress. The levels in the most mindful people, both men and women, were quicker to return to normal after the conflict ended, right? That's suggesting they were keeping their cool, which allows us to recover more quickly. That's also what was discussed in the prior paragraph. Mindfulness is also linked to better relationships with our kids. Studies have found that mindfulness practice can lessen stress, depression, and anxiety in parents of preschoolers and children with disabilities. Mindful parenting is also linked to more positive behavior in kids. So we can certainly model responsive responses rather than reactive parenting. And that is definitely going to create a more peaceful home, leading by example. And also, they found that loving kindness meditation, which is another type of mindfulness meditation, can reduce prejudice towards homeless people. It can decrease unconscious bias, and it can also, it gives us the space to eliminate or question stereotypes rather than react to them. And every day, we're getting more and more information about mindfulness from a scientific perspective. So some of the benefits of increased mindfulness, besides, kind of this overarching themes that we were looking at before, which is like less reactivity, is also reduced rumination. So again, with the default mode network, sometimes we get, lost in thought, but we're not lost in thought towards a goal. We're not lost in thought, reading our cases or thinking about legal issues. We're lost in thought about just random thoughts. That default mode network is activated, right? And we can also get lost in rumination. Rumination, I call it spinning, right? When your mind just cannot get over a certain trigger and you just keep thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. You just can't let go of this particular thought. Mindfulness helps stop rumination and allows us to get to the root of the emotion rather than consistently spinning stories. Okay, and the problem with the spinning and this overthinking, overanalyzing, is that it actually sucks energy away from our lives and our brains. It is not an energy neutral activity, right? And I think that if you've ever experienced, who hasn't experienced some negative emotions and rumination, it takes a lot out of us, right? You can also experience stress in our bodies. In fact, there's a really great book called The Body Keeps Score, and it's about how our bodies process trauma and hold on to trauma and emotion. So it makes sense that when our minds are not managed, when we are all over the place and we're sucking energy by ruminating and buffering, our energy gets greatly reduced. And so on the counter of that is to free our minds from incessant thinking and rumination, and we will have greater energy and a more focused energy to use it on the things that we would rather be pursuing, or that are more beneficial to be pursuing, or that serve us better. So along with that goes that stress reduction, right? And improve working memory, improve focus, reduced emotional reactivity, which is something we discussed before, more cognitive flexibility. So I think, more cognitive flexibility means allowing us to see other solutions and perspectives to problems rather than that need to be right. So one of the things that mindfulness meditation can teach us is that our ego is not our amigo, when we are less focused on our ego, we can we're more receptive to other people's perspectives, and maybe we're also allowing um, our own brain to come up with more creative solutions to problems or issues as they arise. And another thing is increased relationship satisfaction. This isn't just in our romantic relationships, but with our colleagues, with our friends, with our parents, with people out on the streets. It makes sense that if we have reduced emotional reactivity and more cognitive flexibility, we would have greater relationship satisfaction. And this is one of those practices that I think that the more it benefits ourselves, it has a ripple effect out into the rest of the world. So when people hear meditation, I think there can be a lot of fear surrounding this term, or a lot of misconceptions around this term. People have preconceived notions of what it means to meditate. And what I often hear is like, I can't do that. Like, I can't meditate. And it's almost always based on a misconception. And this idea I can't is a limiting belief. And I would offer that it doesn't really serve us to think I can't do something that you haven't tried or haven't tried with guidance, right? So it's really important to understand that mindfulness meditation or insight meditation itself is not a religious practice. It's secular. And like I mentioned before, John Kabat-Zinn created mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is a program, 6-week program, 6 to 8 week program rather, that really teaches people how to incorporate mindfulness in their daily lives as a way to reduce stress. But it has absolutely no religious aspect to it. There is no deity. A lot of people associate mindfulness meditation with Buddhism, and there is a very strong association. Mindfulness meditation was brought to the West by individuals who had traveled to the East to study meditation, and then came back to the West with these teachings. And many of those teachers are Buddhist, but Buddhism itself is not a requirement to learn mindfulness meditation, and indeed, it's not necessarily it's something that can be completely separate from Buddhist teachings. Okay. There's a question that came up that where would one go to get some training on mindfulness? And that is, I'm going to have in this presentation a list of like local resources. But if you're interested in the mindfulness-based stress reduction course, there are a number of practitioners in South Florida who offer that. If you're not in South Florida, I'm sure there's a lot of resources in and around the state. So I will have a list of further resources. So again, it's like mindfulness meditation is not about clearing your thoughts. The idea is not to empty your brain of thoughts. And so when you say, I can't meditate because my mind is going 1,000 miles an hour. For me, I envision a hamster on a wheel. That's my animal, in my brain. And, that's fine. That is not gonna stop you from benefiting from mindfulness meditation or bringing mindfulness into your daily life. There are other kinds of meditation. Mindfulness meditation is just one type of meditation. Another type of meditation you may be aware of is transcendental meditation. And that's it's a different practice. I don't think there's anything better or worse. I just know that the research that we have on meditation practices, the research shows that mindfulness meditation is what is in enhancing our neuroplasticity and our reactiveness, or being less reactive, and it's the path that I chose, and it's the path that I want to continue teaching. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other awesome benefits to doing other kinds of meditation. So that said, mindfulness meditation isn't like chanting. There's no special chants or mantras that you have to utilize. Now, there's a kind of meditation called loving kindness meditation, and that does utilize phrases, but that is not necessarily like a mantra or chanting, but it does allow us to use certain phrases that we would, essentially say in our mind. There's no special gear or posture required for mindfulness meditation. I typically invite people to sit in a dignified, upright position that is comfortable. But some people have trouble not falling asleep in meditation. And so you can actually do a standing meditation if you find that you fall asleep easily. And if you don't fall asleep easily, you could even lie down to do meditation. It's not recommended initially because it is very easy to fall asleep if you're doing a lying down meditation. There's a certain practice called a body scan meditation, and that is typically done while lying down, but lying down on the floor without a pillow rather than in a bed, in order to have that present moment awareness as you engage in the meditation. But there's no, you don't need anything special. You can sit in a chair. Chair meditation is great. The only thing is that when you are using a chair, I would recommend sitting away from the back just a little bit so you can keep yourself upright, again, to avoid slumping over and falling asleep, and also to avoid hurting yourself, because if you're slumped over in a bad posture, it can actually hurt your back. So, and you want to be engaged, you want to be present. You don't want to, it's not, the purpose of mindfulness, unfortunately, is not to relax. It may be relaxing, but the purpose is not to relax. It's to be present and aware of our thoughts and emotions as they arise, to allow us to be responsive rather than reactive. A benefit to this practice is often relaxation, but not always. And so I want us to come in with this idea of, I'm not doing this, forcing myself to get a benefit out of it, right? So it's called a meditation practice because it requires practice. And it's simple, it's a simple practice, but it is not an easy practice, right? Sometimes, even getting on the cushion for a daily meditation, it can be a little daunting, it can be a little boring, and our brain will offer us all kinds of reasons why we cannot spend 10 minutes meditating. And again, I know that your brain's going to offer you, I can't do this, or I don't want to do this, or this isn't going to help me, or how can 10 minutes benefit me? Our brain's going to offer us all kinds of reasons why we cannot do it. And those thoughts are optional, and you definitely do not have to believe them. All right, so as I mentioned before, you can practice mindfulness meditation sitting, standing, walking, or lying down. Walking meditation is an amazing practice. That is, you're not going to be closing your eyes and walking. It's actually being engaged with our body and our breath and body at the same time, to be present. And the word is really embodied, noticing the way our feet and legs move. It really is an incredible practice. And you can find some guided meditations. Thich Nhat Hanh is a Vietnamese instructor, mindfulness teacher, a Buddhist, who has, just really touts the benefits of a walking meditation. And you might look weird walking outside slowly, methodically, deliberately, but the truth is that it's worth looking a little weird to really engage in this practice and benefit from it. So whatever posture you choose, you can experiment with it. There's no best way. I know a lot of us are type A's. We want to know what is the absolute best way to do this. There is no best way. It's just what speaks to you, what you enjoy doing, and what serves you. So there's also different anchors that we can use. Because mindfulness meditation, the goal is to, again, have that present moment awareness. There are certain anchors that can allow us to hold on to that present moment in I want to say an easier way. So breath is one of the best anchors for meditating. And that's because you can only breathe in the present. You can't breathe in the past and you can't breathe in the future. And so when you're focused on your breathing, you are inherently in the present moment. And it is challenging to remain focused on your breathing. And so we're going to talk more about the challenges. But one of the reasons why almost all beginning meditation practices start with breathing awareness or awareness of breath meditation is because it is often the easiest, most present anchor for us. Now, that's, I want to give a little caveat here. I know a lot of us are survivors, and for some of us, breath may not be as accessible to others. Also, if you've had any kind of drowning experiences, sometimes the breath may not feel like a safe refuge. And I don't want you to think that that is the only way to meditate or the only way to be present. If it makes you uncomfortable to use the breath as an anchor, there are really there's other ways to be present. It doesn't require you focusing on the breath. So another anchor could be the sounds. And when we do awareness of sound meditation, the idea is not to label sound or to make the sounds mean something or to get engaged with the pleasantness or unpleasantness of the sound. It's just to be aware of the sound and listen to the sound. Okay. There's also an awareness of bodily sensations. So this can be really helpful if you're in a very reactive or emotional moment, or in pain actually, is if you can sit and be with the emotion as it arises and really look for where it's coming in your body. Emotions are vibrations in the body, right? And that might sound a little weird, but I guarantee if you start to become embodied with your emotions, you may find that they come from a certain place in your body. For me personally, I can say that when I experience anxiety, I feel it very much in my heart space. And when I experience fear, I actually experience it in my arm muscles. You have that rush of adrenaline and cortisol, and it can be pumping through our muscles. And it makes sense because our brain's telling us to fight or run. So some people might feel in their legs. So these vibrations, emotional vibrations, can come in the body, and if we can sit there and recognize where they're coming from, it's a tremendously interesting practice. And then there's also sensations of the body, physical sensations rather than just emotional vibrations. And that is, if you're having some pain, to actually sit and, breathe into the pain. And that might sound a little strange, but when you breathe and can concentrate on focusing where that pain may be and kind of focusing your breath to that space, and allow yourself to accept that the pain is there and experience it without resistance, without judgment, you may find that it dissipates a little bit. And again, remember, the pain times resistance equals suffering. And so when we can learn to accept that the pain is there, you may find a reduction in the pain. Not that the pain isn't real or the pain is not going to be there anymore, but at least that the resistance towards the pain can dissipate. I mean, if you think about it, when we're in danger, we have a tendency to clench, right? So if you think about being in a car accident, we tense up, or even when you get afraid, we tense up, or when we're stressed, we typically tense up. That's why a lot of us have a lot of upper back pain when we're stressful situations. It's that clenching to protect ourselves. And so when we release, we can actually lessen that resistance experience. And if that rings true to you, hopefully you can also see how not resisting a painful experience and relaxing into it and accepting it can make it can result in less suffering. And there's another type of meditation practice. It's called choiceless awareness. And this is an advanced level of meditation technique. And I say it's advanced because, it's where you, when you sit, allowing to whatever comes up to come up. So you'll have, and one way that I have had it described to me is it's like watching your thoughts as if they were like leaves on a river, just floating down the river. So thoughts will come and you just, without being engaged in any story in any one thought, you just watch the thoughts float down the river, right? The river of your mind. And you also can allow whatever thoughts, emotions, sounds, or breath that arise, let that, arise and fall away without being engaged in the story of what it represents. So it is a very interesting practice, but it is, I wouldn't necessarily start out with that as your practice. It may be helpful to start with an awareness of breath or with awareness of sounds or awareness of bodily sensations practice before getting into choiceless awareness. And you can find guided meditations on all of these different practices, including choiceless awareness. So again, I mentioned before that one of the most difficult aspects of meditation, or the perception of meditation, is this idea of needing to clear your mind of all thoughts. So that is not it. I titled this "What to Do When Your Mind Wanders," because your mind will wander. Everybody's mind will wander. You have a human mind, and that's what the human mind will do. And even the most experienced meditators will still have a mind that from time to time will wander. And the good news is, this is the meditation. Your mind wandering and then you bringing it back is the meditation, right? That is actually what allows us to get the space between trigger and reaction, right? So that we can have a response rather than a reaction. It's training our brains to develop that space, right? So what do you do when the mind wanders? You notice that it wanders. So what will typically happen is you'll be breathing, even in a guided meditation. Perhaps I'll say, bring your mind back gently to your breath. You're gonna be like, oh man, I have already planned my entire grocery list, or, I'm deciding what I'm gonna make for dinner on Sunday, or I just remembered I have to do this thing, and let me stop what I'm doing and go write it down. Your brain's gonna say, I need to go write this down, right? So this is normal. Like I said, normal human brain is going to do what a normal human brain does. It's going to think. That's what it does best, right? This is what our brain is evolved to do. So when you are meditating and your mind wanders, you're just going to notice that it's wandered. Right? Often what will be helpful, especially as a new meditator, is to name whatever your mind was doing. So if you're meditating and you start thinking about an unpleasant conversation that you had earlier in the day, you might want to say thinking or ruminating, or whatever gentle label might non-judgmental mental label that works for you. So it could be planning, thinking, ruminating, worrying. If all of a sudden you pop in and you start wondering if you turned off your I was gonna say microwave. That's silly. Turned off your hair straightener, or you turned off the stove, or whether you're going to have an unpleasant conversation later in the day. That you can name that worrying, and it requires no judgment. Your brain is doing what brains do. It's like, thank you, brain. Let's come back to my breath. Let me come back to the sounds. Let me come back to the bodily sensations. It's really important that we speak to ourselves with respect, right? Speak to ourselves with the same respect that we would speak to any of our friends, our children, people that we love, because we need to cultivate love and respect for ourselves fundamentally. And so it's really easy to have this negative self-talk, negative self-judgment. But I guarantee you, just reminding yourself that you are a human with a normal human brain, and there's nothing wrong with that, can be really transformative to your to your life and to your journey. So I highly recommend speaking to yourself kindly and respectfully, and recognizing again that this is the meditation. The mind wandering, you noticing it, and you bringing your mind back to the anchor is the meditation. It's not clearing your mind. And yes, over time, your mind will wander less. Some days will be better than others, but the meditation is the noticing. Okay, so before we practice, I just want to see if anybody has any questions about what it is to meditate, or any fears they may have, or anything at all you want to share before we start a guided meditation practice.
I think everyone's still being shy, but I have to say, if my video had been on, you all would have seen me smiling a lot during it, because I mean, this just speaks to us as lawyers, right?
Yes.
That idea that mindfulness can help you not feel like you always have to be right. Oh, who does that? Me? No. I like
Absolutely.
walking meditation and just different ways to do this to make it less scary and more accessible to everyone. And I do have to admit, I have not gotten to meditation yet in my life. So I'm really happy you're here today sharing this with us. And I hope a lot of people will be inspired to bring mindfulness into their lives. Let's see, we've got a couple questions that came in. And I agree, it would be great to have someone like you or another teacher, to do this kind of meditation when you're starting out, because I know I need a reminder to like put my shoulders down, breathe, like the basics. So that's really helpful. Got a lot of compliments about the training so far. And then we have we have a question from Peter. If someone is unmotivated to do 90% of the things that are good for me, hypothetically, how does one get motivated to do a mindfulness practice?
Motivation is actually everything, and I think that's really interesting. A lot of the things that we think are good for us, right, and we find ourselves unmotivated to do them. It's often because when we've tried them in the past, rather than utilizing motivation, we've tried to use willpower or sheer force of will. Like, I will eat vegetables because they're good for me, but I don't really want to. And that does not work long term. Willpower is an absolute myth. It'll get you through short-term changes, but will not get you through any kind of long-term shifts or changes in behavior or mindset. So in terms of motivation, I think it's important to find a compelling reason. Okay, so I mentioned before, actually, I even have this over here. It's over there. I'm not going to go grab it. But the motivational try. And you know what? I'm going to grab it. This is one of my things that I use in my trainings. Let's see. Maybe you can see it. Oh, maybe not.
It's a little bright to see it.
Yeah. So, there we go. There we go. The motivational. This is not going to be good. I apologize. So anyways, it's a triangle. Hopefully you can see that it's a triangle. So our brains are always wired. So congratulations, Peter, you have a normal human brain, and it doesn't want to do anything, really. Your brain wants to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy, always. That is what the brain wants to do. And that's what kept us alive, right? Avoid pain, seek pleasure, conserve energy. And what are our favorite things? Eating, connecting, and sex. Okay, that's what our favorite things are for our brain. Okay, and so how do we get the motivation is by finding our compelling reason to do something. When there is a life or death situation, we don't even question our motivation. We move, you know, we, you know, there's never any, there's never any second guessing. And so what's fundamental to motivation is truly figuring out what you want, what you really want out of your life and out of your future, and finding a compelling reason that will get you up to do this, right? So, you know, and part of it is like, you know, for me, what helped me develop this practice is the science. I'm very like science focused. And when I can look at the research and see that this absolutely will serve me, this will benefit me, then, you know, I'm more inclined to do it. Wherever it's just like wishy-washy, woo-woo, you know, this sounds like fun, you know, that does not motivate me. But when I see the science behind it, and I say, okay, I think I can try this out because I do want to have a more deliberate life. Or I want to have a less reactive life. I don't want to be angry all the time. Or I don't want to be stressed out all the time. I don't want the back pain, you know, I want to get the space. And so if I really want that, if I find that compelling and I have the science to back it up, I'm just setting myself up to be motivated to make subtle shifts in behavior. I want to offer that real change, lasting change, comes from taking small changes over time, right? Consistent small changes over time. So I do not recommend you say after today, okay, I'm going to start meditating for 30 minutes a day. I mean, awesome, but also you're setting yourself up for failure because I'm going to tell you, even though I'm an experienced meditator, meditating for 30 minutes a day can be very difficult in the beginning. Okay, so so how do you get motivation? The same way you would get motivated for anything is truly finding a compelling reason. So if you're, you know, whatever that might be for you. So really dig deep. I would say dig deep and really think about what you really want and why you think this would be good for you and how you think it could benefit your life. And you can even do, and this is going to sound a little woo-woo, even though, you know, I'm not a woo-woo person, is envision what your life would be like if you did follow through with this commitment for yourself. You know, that could be extremely beneficial. So
that's really helpful. I also think willpower is talked about too much with everything. And this applies to a lot of things, but in our world as attorneys and just as Americans, we're just bombarded with junk food, with stress, with news, and it's great to have a way to quiet things down. Someone was asking, is there a certain time of day that's best to meditate?
the best time of day to meditate is when you have time to meditate. That's the best time. For me, for the longest time, it was in the evenings, even though, you know, technically the best time, the quote unquote best time is in the mornings because not a lot has happened in the morning. So it might be a little bit easier to be mindful when you haven't had a whole day of things that have happened. But if you're anything like me, I remember very well what happened yesterday and the day before yesterday, and you know all the things that might distract me. Not any of the good stuff, by the way, only the bad stuff. I remember very well when I wake up in the morning. So the best time is whatever fits your schedule, whether that be in the morning, in the afternoon, or in the evening. One of my meditation teachers would meditate in his car. You know, dropping off the kids, after dropping off the kids, like wherever he could find time to do it. And that would be sometimes in his car. So a good time to meditate is when it works for you, where you can make it a consistent practice. And that really is the key. And I know nobody wants to hear that, but mindfulness is really going to be transformative when you can practice it consistently over time.
Do you have a favorite mindfulness app that you like to use?
Yeah, I was using 10% Happier for quite some time. And I thought that the guided meditations there were really good. I also use the Insight Meditation app. That is a free app and it has a meditation timer. And so I'm actually going to use it when we do our guided meditation because it has a nice little bell. And so you don't have to go buy a Tibetan singing bowl, they have it there and it's electronic. But that's a great app. Another good app is Calm. I've heard good things about it. I haven't really used it much myself. And I know that if you are an American Express card holder, I think they give you access to Calm for 6 months. And but then you have to put your credit card information in to sign up for it. So I don't necessarily, use that at your own risk. It's free until it's not free. There's also Headspace is another meditation app. So any of those apps are really good. And let me say this also, YouTube and SoundCloud. You can find a lot of wonderful guided meditations on YouTube and SoundCloud. Okay. But check the reviews because you don't want to get anything weird. Like subliminal messages or something. I don't know.
And Rebecca had a book suggestion. It just shuffled on me for how to form good habits. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. I haven't heard of that, so I'm going to write that down. I'll try to remember to send it out to everyone with the recording, these book and app suggestions. And at the end, I'll have Laura talk more about a 6-week course she's doing called Burnout for Attorneys, which, I could think of a few people who could use that. We tend to pride ourselves on being as busy as possible and as stressed as possible. So I think we could probably all use that. And she'll be teaching that course, and it also qualifies for 10.5 CLE credits. So you can get your head straight and get all your CLEs done. So I'll have her talk more about that at the end. I think that's all we have for questions.
Yeah, great. And so I want to say there's no, for compelling reasons, there is no prize for being the busiest person in your office, in your friends group, or there's no prize for being the busiest person. And the thought, I am busy, is not a fact. It's a thought. So I know some people are going to feel triggered by that. Just hear me out. It's a thought and you don't have to believe it. So, all right. So let's start the practice if you're ready. So I'm going to ask that you take 3 self-guided long inhales and long exhales. You can just take these breaths at your own pace and really try to elongate that out breath. That out breath is shown to relax our vagal nerve. Okay, and I will invite you to gently close your eyes and sit in a dignified, upright position. You can let your belly be soft and your back just engaged, not stiff, not hard, just engaged. And as we sit with our eyes gently closed or our gaze averted down, we're going to begin to focus our mind on our in-breath. So without trying to control your breathing or change your breathing, just let your breathing be natural and flow as it may. Just notice, if you can, your in-breath. Just bring a gentle curiosity to the point of your body that takes in the flow of air. So where do you notice your in-breath first? How do you notice them? Is that breath cool? Is it a cool sensation in your nostril? Is it a warm sensation? Do you feel it just on the outside of your nose, or does it hit inside the nostril? Just bring an element of curiosity, no judgment. And no expectation. Notice that each new breath is unique to itself. You will never breathe the same breath more than one time. So each new breath is completely new to you. Just settle in to the sensation of your body breathing in. And if your mind wanders, as it will, just come back to that sensation of your body breathing. Bring your mind back to the sensation and curiosity of your body breathing. If, as you are focusing on your breath, you notice another sensation in your body, feel free to take your breath to that sensation and just breathe into it. And as I sit, you may notice some obvious signs of tension in your body. You may want to check for any obvious signs of tension. So, are you holding in your forehead? And if so, just gently release any tension you may have there. Or your temples, maybe gently squeezing your eyes closed. If you can, see if you can offer a little release. And breathe in to that space. Another area where you may be holding tension right now is in your shoulders, your neck, or your upper back. Just gently bring your awareness to that area of your body and notice if there's any tension there. If so, I invite you to bring your awareness and your breath to the tension and see if you can offer yourself a little release. And anywhere else you may be experiencing tension, just take your awareness there and your breath and release if you can. Now let's bring our awareness back to our in breath. Has it changed? Where do you feel the sensation of your in breath? You may find yourself trying to direct your breath or control your breathing. And that's a-okay. There's no problem. There's no drama. Just notice that I'm wanting to have my breath be a certain way. Remember, if your mind wanders, there's no problem, there's no drama. You can give it a gentle note, thinking, thinking, and bring your awareness back to your breath, back to your in breath. Where is your breath now? How is your breath now? I invite you to take your awareness now from your initial in breath. Just see if you can follow your breath as it becomes an in breath to an out breath. You can bring awareness to the route your breath takes in your body. Where does it go? Sounds may arise. You may want to just gently name them sounds. Sounds. Bring your awareness back to the voyage of your breath in your body. Can you notice the change in temperature from your breath as it transforms from an in breath to an out breath? So when and where in your body does that breath go from cool to warm? Does it go from cool to warm? Does it go from warm to to warmer. What is your breath like for you now? And where do you experience your out breath as it leaves your body? Where is the very last part of your body that experiences that out breath? Can you experience your breath leave your body on a microscopic level? Does your breath favor one nostril more than the other? Is your breath equal between the two? Are you breathing through your mouth? If so, how does your breath feel leaving your lips? Where is your breath now? If your mind is wandering, it's not a problem. There's no drama. Just bring your awareness back to the voyage of your breath through your body. Can you experience your breath as a dynamic, amazing function, energizing you with billions and trillions of molecules going through you? Can you experience a sense of gratitude, this life-giving breath that flows through you? Thank you, breath. And thank you, brain, for giving me all my thoughts. It allows me to practice my meditation. Can you cultivate a sense of gratitude for the time you've been given here, the time you've given yourself, and acknowledge that you've done something loving and compassionate for yourself, and you deserve it. As you hear the bell, see if you can hold on to your awareness of your breath until the breath, until the sensation of the sound goes completely away. When you're ready, feel free to open your eyes and come back to awareness, and let me know what came up for you, if you're willing to share. And thank you so much for your practice.
Thank you so much, Laura. And you should be able to unmute yourselves if you have any questions or want to give some feedback about the guided meditation. It was definitely very relaxing. I don't know about everyone else, but at the beginning, I felt my hands twitching. Like the left one wanted to reach for my phone and the right one wanted to reach for my coffee, but I resisted. I don't know if anyone else had that experience.
Just thank you, brain. That's, we have a lot of energy. And so and especially if we're not used to not doing, it can be our brain can be like, what's going on here? Why aren't you doing something? Do something.
Well, thank you, Laura. That was very informative. I meditate early in the mornings. So midday, that really did do me some good. My shoulders are not around my ears. So I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else want to share? Lisa said it makes me want to do meditation more often. That's good. Me too, because like I said, I have the opposite problem with Peter. I figure I'm doing a lot of other things right and healthy, so I'm allowed not to have the patience to learn meditation. So I'm gonna try not to give myself a pass on that, because I can see how it would be really helpful. My kids are tired of hearing me say that back in the old days, we didn't have all these electronics keeping our attention all the time. And that's when you come up with your best ideas, is when you are bored or not immediately doing 3 things at once.
Well, you're right, because back in the old days, we would get out and physically play, jump rope, we joined the kids, things like that to release all that pent-up energy. So it is a different age now. You're definitely right about that, but it's worth doing for yourself.
Exactly. I will try to make myself not pull out my phone when I'm waiting in line for something. Just stop.
Put that thing away. Give me a landline. Talk about old school. I cannot stand a cell phone. And my daughter gets so mad at me because she's like, mine's is broke now. And she says, Mom, you have to get a new cell phone. I said, why? She's like, look, it's like a new relationship. Just learn it all over again. And I kid you not, you talk about procrastination, Laura. I am procrastinating when it comes to that phone. I hate them because I'm on the phone all day at work.
Yeah.
Right. I was going to say that the waiting in line is actually a really great place to practice a standing meditation.
There you go.
And I, because I am a very impatient stander in liner. And I find this to be some of my best work is when I'm like, take a deep breath. For me, it's Walgreens. I don't know why. Well, standing in line at Walgreens, it just kills me. And so that's where I know I have to do the work. And, part of it is just accepting, like, this is something I cannot control. I cannot make it go any faster. And in fact, my resistance to it by my shifting or, getting anxious or, tapping my foot or, it actually, that's the resistance. That's the suffering, right? It's the pain of having to wait online, and then the resistance to it. And then it's like, that's what makes it awful. And if you can, attempt to, just acquiesce, control to the situation, and just use that time as a practice to breathe and be present. It is phenomenal. So yeah, you could do a standing meditation anywhere, but especially in line.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I find that getting out and moving, and I'm sure meditation has the same effect, but getting out and moving helps me think about cases. You know, if I'm stuck on something and I just need to get my mind right about it and figure out what exactly I'm arguing for and how to put it together, I will go walk or take a bike ride. So I will try to add meditation in there, get those brain juices flowing in a good way. I did want to let everyone know that I will send out the slides with the recording, and lots of compliments. It was very helpful. So that's great. And you know, I did have to peek at the numbers while we were doing the brief practice just to make sure everyone didn't log off and get scared. So I'm proud of everyone for hanging in there and giving it a try.
I do want to say something quickly is that it can be daunting to start something new, you know, and I want to offer that something like meditation is beneficial even if you only do it for 5 minutes. One of my instructors used to tell me, get your tush on the cush, right? And the idea is it would be better to even do 2-minute or 5-minute meditation a day than do a 30-minute meditation once a week. And so the idea is your brain will tell you you don't have time, and that's not true. You don't have to believe it. And developing this consistent practice, you know, just try it and see if it benefits you. But that I sometimes get into this perfectionist mindset, or in the past, I found myself getting into this perfectionist meditation, which is like, if I don't do something perfectly right, then what's the point of doing it? But that kind of mentality or mindset doesn't work with meditation. That 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, it makes a huge difference. And so even taking just a brief, you know, 5 minutes out of your day at any point during your day to just sit with your breath. You know, the Insight meditation app is free. That's the timer I use. You just set it up, time it for 5 minutes. Give yourself 5 minutes. And I promise you, you will be on your way to developing and strengthening a mindfulness practice, not only your formal meditation practice, but your informal practice, which is the practice of mindfulness in your daily life. You know, one thing I didn't mention in here, and it's another great meditation practice, is mindful eating.
Yeah.
And so that's also when you eat, eating one bite at a time, putting down your utensil, not scrolling and eating at the same time, not watching and eating, not talking and eating, but really just enjoying your food one bite at a time, putting your utensil down, chewing completely, and then taking another bite, and really being present and experiencing your food, really truly engaging with it. It's incredibly beneficial, and you actually enjoy your food more than you would otherwise, because sometimes we have a tendency to kind of inhale our food and like, where did it go? That's the default mode network, right? Working. And, you know, that's kind of how we can spend the rest of our lives. If we spend most of our life with the default mode network activated, it just literally flies by. And we see this happening, right? With the months, just the days, the weeks, the months just flying by, and we can wonder where the time went. So I think it behooves us to be present with the time that we're given, so we can truly experience more joy in the here and now and enjoy the time that we have with each other. That's my hope for all of us, really.
Ditto. Very good.
And I definitely want you to tell everyone about your Burnout for Attorneys course. I put the link to register in the chat, but I wanted Laura to give us more information about that, including all the different CLE credits you can earn by taking that course.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So yeah, I actually did this first Burnout course in December, and it went really well. And so I decided to do it again in March. It's a 6-week course. And I know that sounds very daunting, but it is an hour and a half once a week. And I promise it will be transformative. We go first start with time management skills. So you will learn how to manage and schedule your time in a way that is beneficial for you, your family, and your clients. And that's the first piece. Then we also talk about boundaries and procrastination. We learn about imposter syndrome, perfectionism. We also take a good hard look at buffering. And I teach something called the thought model, and that's recognizing, I keep saying, you can hear me talk about our thoughts are optional. It's about recognizing that our thoughts are what cause our feelings, and our feelings are what create our actions, and our actions produce our results. So it's really taking responsibility and ownership for our thoughts and our feelings in a way that allows us to truly take control of our lives. And the whole goal of this program is to eliminate burnout from your life for good, and to really transform your relationship with your mind and your schedule. So it's really incredible. I love this work, and it's 10.5 credits in Florida. We have, I think it's 2 CLE credit, 2 ethics credits, 1 substance abuse credit, 1 mental illness credit, and technology credit, the elusive technology credit. So you need 2 every cycle. So that'll get you 1. And it's 75% off for pro bono attorneys, and that ends up being $75. So it's $75 for a 6-week course and 10.5 CLE credits. And if you have any questions about that, do you mind if I put my email in? Anyone wants to ask me anything?
Go right ahead. And I also did want to announce the CLE credit, just in case you're joining by phone or you can't see it in the chat. The CLE number for today's webinar is 2009-472, N as in Nancy. Again, it's 2009-472, N as in Nancy, and it was approved for 1 general CLE credit. So I'll see if there's any last questions, but thank you so much for this, Laura. It was so helpful. And I'm so glad we did it on a Friday. It just turned out to be perfect timing. We're almost a year into COVID, so it seems like a good time to work on mindfulness and wellness. So I really appreciate you bringing your knowledge to all of us, and even doing the guided meditation. I think that was a great introduction, because it's hard to get started on your own. So it's perfect that it was part of this webinar.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. And I really appreciate being able to share this with you all. I put up here a poem, if anyone wants to read it, by Rumi. So yeah, and if anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Feel free to reach out. Super grateful to be here. Thank you so much.
We really appreciate you doing this, and I hope everyone got a lot out of this and has a great weekend. You can reach out to me or to Laura with any questions, and I'll send out the recording and the PowerPoint. It should come to you from Zoom tomorrow, but please don't check your email on the weekends. It'll be there Monday. Still be there. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Great weekend. Bye.
Bye.